Seen enough already? Link down in the video description below.
Comes with 0802 14,000 kV motors, 31mm tri-bladed gem fan props, Caddx Ant for your FPV camera. The all-in-one board is the Happy Model Crazy Bee X, which has a 5 amp ESC with a burst rating up to 6 amp and an F411 processor. These are the new GNB 27 2.0 connectors, and they are solid pin, and they're hard too. Batteries mount up with this little 3D printed piece. It only sits flat if you manipulate the battery wires, which are somewhat of a stiff silicone-based wire. It weighs just under 23 grams. With the 250 milliamp eSheen batteries it comes with, it weighs 37.5 grams. Motor post to motor post, I am getting 65 millimeters. Got an inside flight here during the day, of all things. My wife is actually working at her desk, so you'll get a quick view of her over there. We'll be flying straight at her a few times as well. So we've got the sun out, so we get to see the camera and the lights and the indoor flight and all that stuff. I am gonna have, I think it's 2 crashes in this flight. This flight's long enough to where I just don't have the endurance to fly like I want to fly and be able to go for 4 minutes. I think this goes 3 minutes and 30 seconds, somewhere thereabouts. But we're going to have our first crash right around the 2 minutes and 30 second marker. I'm also going to include a crash reel back at the desk so you get to look at some of the other crashes that I had. Not all of them. Crash reels are very tedious to put together, but I'll be putting some of those in there, maybe a dozen or so different crashes. And then we'll also have an outside flight where you'll get to see how it performs outside. And we have another crash from a higher altitude outside to see as well. So that's part of the durability. I think that's one of the things that I was concerned about when I saw this. Now, the US Pro, the previous iteration of this, the frame wasn't very durable. And to my surprise, I'll tell you already, if you didn't notice in the quick roll, the quad has held together, but I did have some damage. The very front post that the canopy mounts to and also the flight controller rests against, so to speak, that did snap off. So that's one crash point or one durability point that we might look at. Also, the canopy is not the Uzi 65 canopy. It is a little bit different, and we'll also take a look at that back of the desk. That's probably especially important to some of you that might be looking to do builds of your own using your own combination of parts, or maybe you're looking at put together an ultralight build that might be using that canopy and want to use a Caddx Ant. The Caddx Ant in the Uzi 65 does not fit natively, but this quad flies very well. It comes pre-tuned, but it does come with Betaflight 357 at a later time down the road. When you're watching this, it may come with a different version of Betaflight. As time goes by, sometimes these things get updated with different versions of Betaflight and different tunes. I don't mind 357 Betaflight version on my quads. I think I can tune that pretty well, and I think specifically with whoops and this form factor, 357 works really, really well, and it's actually a little bit easier to set up in my opinion. You know, it doesn't have VTX tables, which some people, I don't know, some people might like them. I don't think I talk to them too much. Most people kind of don't care for the VTX tables and some of the other Betaflight setup stuff that has kind of changed once we really got into 4.0. Oh, there we saw a crash. I hit a shirt of all things, then dropped down to the concrete. As far as the battery mounting, it's not ideal, but we've seen it before. It's kind of taking that 65mm Whoop frame design and making it work for 2S purposes. I was speaking a minute ago about the frame and its durability. This must be different materials than the US65 Pro, because the US65 Pro, I think, broke apart for most people. I know that mine broke, and then I got a replacement frame, and actually I think if I remember correctly, I swapped it over to the traditional 65mm, the B-Whoop, I think it was 65mm frame, the clear plastic one. This one seems to be much different materials, and that's really hard to convey within a video sort of review, but you'll get to see crashes, you see how I fly, and so you get to look at some of the durability. But it flies nice. I actually prefer flying 2S in the house. There's something about the quick throttle response that I can make the corrections like I need to make them in order to keep from crashing as much, and I just enjoy the speed. I like the pod racer style of feeling that we get from quads in general, but that's just my style. So it's going to vary a little bit, but when we move outside, you'll get an opportunity to see somewhat of a different flight style. You know, I'm not a great freestyler. I don't have a lot of creativity in my flight. I just like to kind of rip around and then work in some light freestyle, I guess I would call it. You also see there that we're getting really low in the battery. That was a problem that I had. I would have so much fun I'd forget. And then the LAN now is on, so we saw the battery got down to 385 or 285, which was the low point, and we see it climbing back up now to over 3 volts per cell. Not ideal for good battery health, but you see we ended there at 320. Nice calm day. So we got to fly on a nice calm day. That's important when it comes to these little guys with prop guards or ducks or what have you, what that you want to call them. When you have these flat surfaces and you have any sort of wind, they can blow them around a little bit. But this is where you get to see a little bit more of its punch, a little bit more of its acro ability, its flight outside ability. Also note that I still have the whoops in view, so my camera angle is not real extreme. So this is a relatively modest camera angle. I didn't do extensive dive testing, but as you saw there with that dive, seemed to work out just fine. I didn't feel the nose pulling over. What we're typically looking for there is what we call yaw washout. Sometimes in this form factor, if the power to weight ratio isn't enough, as you're coming out of the dive or as you're finishing your dive or some point during the dive, it will pitch up on kind of on its own, and then it will usually yaw around one way or another, again on its own. So it gives you that feeling of not being in control, and that can be problematic for some people. It's kind of been something that we've known about and we've just kind of been coping with. Also go over to my neighbor's yard. We test the range, the link ability. This is bound in D8 mode. I did not test D16. Of course, if you have a Radiomaster T16S or one of the other multi-protocol radios, that will not be an issue for you. But if you have one of the newer FrSky radios, you might need to go out and get that Beta FPV Lite 2 radio in order for it to be compatible and get decent range out of it. I've heard of people binding D8 receivers, these SPI receivers, in D16 mode, and then the range is really poor. So that's something to keep in mind depending upon the radio that you have. Doing some light acro, and let's talk a little bit about the GNB connector. So you'll find that on the Banggood website they list two different connectors. They've got the GNB 27 2.0 and they've got the ET 2.0. The information that I have says that the ET 2.0 is compatible with the GNB 27. So regardless of the quad that you get, you'll have compatible batteries that are available to you. We don't see, or I haven't seen, any GNB batteries with the new connector available for sale yet. I've seen some postings for the connectors though. So if you wanted to transition some of your connectors, you could probably get some of those new GNB connectors. And my feeling on the connector is that Beta FPV may have shot themselves in the foot. There's a couple of issues with that BT2.0 connector. One is that it's not keyed, so you can possibly plug it in backwards, and the connector isn't real hard. The plastic they use on the outside isn't real hard, so yet another reason why you might be able to plug it in backwards. And I've talked to a couple of you that have swapped out the connectors for the BT2.0 that have fried some boards because it was soldered on backwards or the battery was plugged in backwards. And I don't think we're going to have that problem with this new connector, and GNB being a major battery manufacturer and having good batteries, probably going to dominate the market. Now, it could come down to weight for those people that are looking for every 1/10 of a gram. Maybe these are heavy enough to where it's not worth it to you, maybe. I'm really speculating there. I think for most of us, the casual flyers, we just want a good connector, and we want that connector to evolve away from, we went from PH 1.25 to PH 2, and then we've seen BT2.0, and now we're seeing GNB 27.20 and this ET connector. So we're seeing some evolution, but we need them to come together. If you're asking me why BT2.0 wasn't widely adopted, my understanding is the cost of the BT2.0 connector, got tangled up in a tree, and that crash. But you can see we're fine there. We're going to take back off. But the connector was being sold at a premium to the other manufacturers and quad companies to where it wasn't cost effective. My understanding is it would cost more than not only PH2.0, but it cost more than an XT30 as well. So other manufacturers just didn't adopt it, and that could be its kind of end of life. But we'll see. You never know about these things. Maybe maybe there's too much investment out there in the market already that people won't want to switch. I don't know. I'm speculating. I personally think this is better. But you see, we've come to the end of the flight. I really drained that battery pretty hard. It was well below 3 volts per cell, something else we want to test. And we can see there on the OSD that it was flashing 0. So we don't have an issue with the board resetting on low voltage, which is something that we saw on the early Mobula 6 purchases. At some point of the production runs on the Mobula 6, that was taken care of, I'm told. But some people have experienced it, so I thought I'd better test that. I'll show you my damage that I've got here. Hopefully I can get my camera to focus on this enough. You can see how I'm kind of pulling this up. See down in there, that front standoff broken. The screw is still in there, so the standoff must be inside, and that's how it's holding the flight controller. Also, I think the wire that they're using over here is a little bit thicker. That may be of benefit to some people. I talked about the canopy being different. Let me get one out. Before we talk about that, also note here on the back, they've removed the main connector on the back of the Caddx Ant. See, no connector on this side, but they left the connector on this side. And so you can take the included cabling and make camera changes if you want to change color, saturation, brightness, whatever the setting is that you want to change. You do have that ability, but when it comes to swapping out the camera, you will have to either solder on this lead to a new camera and take off the connector of that new camera as well. The reason why I brought this up is I bought a bunch of these, and I thought myself that the Caddx Ant would just go inside, and it does fit through the lens area, kind of. You kind of have to force it through there. I had this sitting in there. Now I can't hardly, there, I got it punched through, so you can see that that's awful tight. Hopefully you can see how tight that is. And then we have an issue where the stance for the holes to mount the camera is wider. So even with this, you'd have to print a spacer or something to go between the edge of the camera where the screw mount is and where the actual plastic of the canopy is. And you note that on this, it has that sunken in. So this camera is natively going to fit the Caddx Ant. So that's something to keep in mind for builders if you're looking to use this canopy for other purposes. I do like this canopy because it has 4 points that it's mounted, so that should keep it very steady. We've had issues with steady and micro mounts. Also, I think it's pretty durable. I think this is probably the same materials as this, and I also think the frame is probably made of the same stuff. It just doesn't feel brittle like the original US65 Pro frame does. And of course, I've crashed it around. You saw the speed run, and you crash a lot when you try to do those, or I crash a lot when I try to do those speed runs, and the only damage that I have to report is that front standoff. If you missed it in the quick roll, we still have connectors for our motors, so swaps should be relatively simple and easy.
If you like whoops, you kind of have a couple of them. You never want to be down. And maybe this 2S65mm is just what you're looking for with its new lower weight. But then again, it's up to you to choose. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.